ha, 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 yeah. Feel like that. Bang.
Too long. I'll talk about the stuff we do with the younger athletes. We train athletes from middle school up through college and beyond. Sometimes there's post-collegiate athletes that are prepping for trials or are on international teams. Sometimes they come to the gym. Sometimes I travel to do that. And what's interesting is I started speaking with Louie only a little bit before me and AJ started connecting. We connected really through the internet and being in the same circle of strength and conditioning. But Louie, was really the first guy to get me to be okay with the way I was training. I didn't have a gym. I started training athletes at my parents' house, and then the first house I bought out of the garage. And Chris was one of the first athletes out of the two-car garage, and our results were really powerful back then. And to be honest with you, it was very awkward because a lot of big-name coaches out there thought it was silly that we were climbing ropes in backyards, pushing trucks, sprinting up hills, swinging sledgehammers, running with sandbags. I wouldn't do something like a 3 sets of 10 or something like that. I would say farmer walk the kettlebells all the way up the street, get 50 push-ups, farmer walk them back, then we get into a workout. Sometimes I would do a bunch of stamina and conditioning work first. I know AJ said when we're training for the powerlifting, we do the main lift first. But I would switch that because with athletes, what I look to do and what you need to look to do as a coach is to fill the void of what they don't get. So you want to, our gym, I've never lifted or seen live training at Westside minus all the films I've seen the original ones. But I used to call Louie all the time when I was at work during my prep when I was a teacher. We would talk every week. And he really got me to being okay with what I really prefer doing is auto-regulation when we train, which means you show up and I warm you up. That's always our assessment. And I was telling you guys yesterday, I want you to assess during the movement. When we see that they're looking good and high energy, we're going to push that workout. And I'll be okay with coming up and racing and making that workout more intense, or vice versa, making it less intense, deloading them. Training should never take away from what the athlete has to do. Maybe in the beginning, it will slightly fatigue them more than they're used to. Because today is different. I'm 37, I'm almost 38. In the 90s or the late 90s is when full year-round sports began. Baseball was no longer just in the spring, baseball was in the fall, then it was in the winter, then you had summer league. There were maybe 3 weeks off in August. Back in the day, they could afford to have heavier off-season training. Now it's almost like in-season year-round. So one thing I want to hammer home to is you're training athletes, don't crush them. You want to leave them with a little bit in the tank when they leave so that they're motivated to come back and train with you again. If they're beat up and then they feel like it's impeding their performance when they're at practice, not only they feel it, but let's say their sports coach says something, and a lot of times sport coaches, unfortunately, have very big egos, and they might say, Tony, right? They may say, Tony, you look like shit today, you're moving so slow. You can't be training over there at the underground strength gym. You can't be training at CrossFit, ABC. You need to stop. It's messing up your ability to jump high. Boom, he's out, he's done. So we have to, there's a tough thing behind being an independent strength coach, but it's also extremely critical that we start doing a way better job of taking care of young athletes. A way better job. AJ spoke about some of the things that were done in the European countries and in Russia. That stuff was going on minimum 40 years ago. My dad grew up in Romania, and when he was young, when they had phys ed class, it was something like every quarter or every 4 to 6 months. They would have the boys weigh in with their boxers, stand against the wall, and according to their body structure, they move this kid to that sport. They move, you're built like this, you're gymnastics. You're built like this, you're going to be long jumper. You're built like this, you're a soccer player. You're a weightlifter, you're a wrestler. It wasn't like, oh, I love football, let me play football. It had nothing to do with that. This is what you're built for. This is how we're going to train you, pull you into the sport camp. We're going to also send you to the different cafeteria. You're going to eat better. You're going to do a lot of, you're going to have a different treatment, so to speak. And we're way behind that. You know, we have high school varsity athletes who come in and can't do one pull-up, can't do one good push-up, can't do a squat. So it's our job to really step it up. So when you're training, I don't want you to think of sport-specific stuff. Somebody was asking me a question. Was that you, Zach? Was asking me a question, or I think his coach said it, and he said, well, athletes are always on the balls of their feet. I'm a baseball player, I'm getting ready on the balls of my feet. If I'm a wrestler, some wrestlers are flat-footed, but some of them are on the balls of their feet. If I'm a basketball player, I'm sprinting. Hopefully I'm not heel striking. Why do we squat flat-footed? When you're training athletes, I don't want you to think of what movement do they do, and how can I mimic that? You want to think of strengthening the muscles that are involved in sport, period. So that's why the basics are always going to win. Squatting of all variations, clean and press, ground to overhead, various pulling motions, body weight, weighted, vertical, horizontal, rotational drills, unilateral stuff. Once you start strengthening their muscles, and then you start building athleticism, coordination, then you can start moving to being more explosive and developing my favorite is special strengths. Highly influenced through what Louis would talk about, which is your ability to have a unique kind of strength. There's all the different kinds of strength. There's strength speed, speed strength, strength endurance, speed endurance, power endurance, explosive strength. There's all those different ones. So you start thinking about what those athletes need, and then you start tweaking the programming to match their needs. So when we're training here, you might see various things going on. You might see a lot of different squats going on in the same workout. Somebody might be doing back squats. Somebody else might be doing Zercher squats with the bar or the sandbag and the crooked elbows. Somebody might be doing a kettlebell goblet squat. Others might be doing doubles. Others might be doing box squats. It's a very tough way to program. We've had a lot of CrossFit coaches come to the CERT. They observe classes, and if they run a traditional CrossFit class, they're like, holy shit, I would not be able to do this. I need everybody doing the deadlift with the straight bar, with 115 pounds on the bar. But you can't do that for athletes for various reasons. Number one, they're not all going to be at the same level as your adults. Athletes tend to have an on-again, off-again training program, which sucks because that's not really what works best. What works best is year-round training. So you're going to have experienced lifters, less experienced lifters. So you want to look at every exercise as what progressions and regressions you could have. So some people might be benching. Somebody else might be doing dumbbell bench. Somebody else might be weighted push-ups. The person that might be weakest in that group might be doing hand elevated push-ups. So what you're looking to do is have those same motions going on, but we're accommodating what their weak areas are and also the time of year. Meaning, are they in the season? You got to really be careful with certain motions according to that athlete. Are they post-season where we have to put muscle back on and maybe do a little bit less heavy lifting? So when we're training, there's a lot of different things going on. So kind of, you know, when AJ's talking about at Westside, you can't say you're training Westside unless you're in Westside. That's what I do when we're here as far as like tweaking things. And I say the same thing to my coaches. I tell them, you guys need mental agility when you're working with these athletes. Because they can come in one day feeling great, the next day they can be all jacked up, beat up, this shoulder hurts, that shoulder hurts, and you have to be able to work around those things. What's really important is that you don't get carried away with trying to copy what you see, I guess, out there. You have to be in tune with what these athletes are doing, and I want you, according to your own philosophy, to look at what I like to say is create a timeline. So I would have at the end of, I have these whiteboards in my office, and I like try to organize stuff in my mind like a beautiful mind, except with weights instead of numbers, right? So I'm like got exercises here, and I'm always saying to myself, what would this group of athletes need really to get them to a high level of performance? And I list them. That's really like where I want to get to. And now I work backwards, and I create a intermediate level, and then I create a beginner level. And you could have really 4 levels. Doesn't have to be just advanced, intermediate, beginner. But essentially what we have is when an athlete comes to this gym, I don't care how experienced they are as an athlete. I've trained Olympic level athletes that are not strong at all, that are not coordinated at all as far as weight training, strength and conditioning, body weight training, but they're very high level athletes. High level athlete doesn't mean high level lifter. Two totally different things. I've even seen gold medalists that you're like, dude, only you knew how to lift could have their gold medal.
What they say, swimming out of the water?
Yeah, exactly. It's just, I was like, I'm still in shock by those things. So what I do is I map those things out, and then I work backwards. Somebody new always starts with our level 1, like our baseline, our introductory stuff. How long does it take for us to get to those level 2 things? It's different. It depends on their commitment level, depends on their ability to pay attention, depends on their frequency of showing up, their recovery, doing all these right things. But what's basically the ticket here is we're always pushing for progress. That's number 1. And number 2, when we program, I like to do mini cycles, very similar to what AJ was talking about yesterday. I used to be a lot more rigid. And through the years, I've seen the evolution of sport, which requires us to evolve as coaches. It requires you to evolve as CrossFit coaches. You know, earlier in the days, CrossFit, when CrossFitters used to come to the cert, it was like awkward to be flipping a tire, to use sandbags, to deadlift with a trap bar. But now they're seeing, like AJ said, you go to the games, you don't know, it calls for 12 weeks of bench and you're using a straight bar, you're just changing the percentages. You as a coach might be disciplined enough to do 12 weeks of a straight bar, but athletes, CrossFitters are not mentally disciplined enough to handle it. They'll get bored of it. If they're not mentally stimulated, they don't want to do the training, there's no intensity behind it. So here's how we program. You might want to write some of this stuff down. And when you talk to people, that's what you want to do. You want to tell them what to do. See how I do shit? Write it down, baby. Did you write it down, kids? I program in 2-week mini cycles. It used to be a 3-week cycle, 4th week deload. No questions asked. Week 4, deload. Damien comes in, he's like, I want to fucking kill it. Too bad, deload. That's what the Romanian book says to do, right? I was too rigid with that stuff. But the more I got in the trenches learning what athletes need, the more I realized it's okay to tweak stuff. Don't be afraid to change things. So the 2-week cycle works like this. The first week, we're kind of like reestablishing baseline weights, reestablishing techniques, making sure everything's dialed in. It's a little bit more coaching time, a little more talking. The second week, we don't really have to go that much into detail of the technique. So that second week, we're looking for them to break a record. There's many ways to break records. And this is also important. You might want to write it down, you may not. Do you need a pen? Are you okay? Okay. There's many ways to break records. I could add weight and move more weight, correct? What's another way to break a record? Somebody else tell me.
Number of reps.
Speed. Could do number of reps. Speed, better time. What else?
Change the bar.
Not to break a record, like to improve. Changing the bar may not necessarily, that was just change the way you work the muscle, but what about better technique? The best way I always kind of like describe it is, what if Carlos comes and does 5 push-ups, but it's kind of like grinding them out, not really clean reps. Next week he does 5 push-ups, bang, bang, bang. Has he broken a record? How? He's got better technique. He got it a little bit faster. Somebody mentioned speed. So sometimes the bar, weight, and on all that stuff remains the same, but the technique gets better. So we're looking to break records in many ways. AJ mentioned breaking records is like, it takes a toll on. So I'm going to kind of, we do a 3-day split. Not all athletes come here 3 days because they're training sport year-round. It's crazy. Some of them train once a week, some of them train twice a week. So if I know that somebody's training twice a week, this is what pushed me to tweak things. I used to do full body workouts all the time. And then I found that we were a little bit holding them back on strength gains because we weren't doing supplemental type lifts, dumbbell benching, 1-arm row, following up to put muscle mass on them. So I started doing an upper, a lower, and then a full body day. And I would do a day 1, day 2, day 3. But then you got the athletes that only train twice a week. So it's the end of the month, and you're like, crap, that kid always does upper lower day, if it's upper lower full. Or I'm like, shit, he always does full body day, upper day, he never gets that heavy duty lower body day. So every month, I switch where those days fall to make sure that that athlete gets the work that he needs. And that brings me to another point, that every workout is flawed. You're going to do your best to program as best as you can, but it's never going to be perfect. So don't kill yourself over it, and don't go home and like cry about it and just be like, I didn't get this right. They're all flawed. There's nothing perfect to it. But that's actually what life is. Life is flawed. Sports are flawed. Nothing is in the perfect setting. And we kind of want them to prepare for the unpredictable. Being fatigued, being sore, training a little bit later in the day, training earlier in the day. So when I'm programming, I used to always program heavy first, or explosive had to be done first, then heavy. Then I started thinking of, okay, what about the kids that play 2 baseball games in a day? What about the wrestlers that might be at a long tournament, 3 to 6 matches in a day? And that's the more I started speaking with Louie, and I actually just went and hung out at a coach's prep course, and Dave Castro was talking, and he said, train with a long warm-up, train with no warm-up, train heavy, then go light. Go take a 10K run, then go and hit a max effort deadlift. He was just talking about mixing it up, and I started thinking about what our athletes needed, not just from a physical standpoint, but from a mental standpoint. So if I feel like a group needs to get a lot tougher, then I scrap like a traditional style workout, and I'm like, I'm just gonna fuck these dudes up. And I just train them, pull them shit out of my head. And that's why I tell them, like, guess what workout's today? Like, day 2. I go, no, this one. I go, that's the last workout you guys want. But when I train athletes, here's the other thing. I throw out a lot of points. I don't pick complicated drills to teach. Easy to teach, easy to learn, get that shit going. The reason why we don't do a lot of weightlifting with them is because we don't know when they're going to come and go. We're going to have a group that might be highly experienced mixed with brand new kids. And then if you're doing weightlifting, that has to really be a separate dialed-in class. If you've ever gone to a CrossFit Kids course, a weightlifting class is an invite only. So you're going through like your regular CrossFit Kids, and then when they see the potential in you and also the mental maturity, then they invite you into a weightlifting class, and it's a very small number. I think they do like 4 to 6 or 4 to 8 kids. For us, because we train athletes, our flexibility with their scheduling, if you're a parent, or if you work with other parents who have kids, they're running around from different schools, different sports, they work in Manhattan, so you never know when they can get there. So we work around all that, and I understand it's going to be flawed. So we do quick lifts with simple stuff. Tire flips are quick lifts. Sandbag drills are quick. Dumbbells and kettlebells allow us to mimic weightlifting, snatches, clean and press. Is it perfect? Is it exactly what they need? No, but I'll tell you this. Their mobility is so screwed up with all their overuse of sports that you need to do a lot more of these dumbbells, kettlebells, sandbags, odd type lifting, because it allows them to get into the positions a little bit better. You're going to have kids doing dumbbell snatches with 75 pounds with one arm versus a 65-pound, 65-pound snatch with 2 arms. We're doing cleans with 65 pounds on a barbell. Really, we have kids doing, dumbbell chin curls with 75 pounds. We're using back and legs. So we'll find ways around getting into the complex stuff. Okay? Here's the last point I want to hit home to you guys that allows us to work with the kind of eccentric thing. We look at, when I look at an exercise, I look at all the variations to it. And Louie influences to me big time. My favorite DVD was first on VHS was the Special Strength tape, or DVD. So that original one actually, he had Mark Bell on it, he had like a lot of his young lifters. And Special Strengths, he was talking about training fighters. And this is the very early days of CrossFit, early days, okay, 10, 11 years ago. And I started really utilizing all these couplets and doing things like 10 sets of 2, 8 sets of 3, 10 minutes, you know, DJ came to like one of the early workouts and I had him do, I think it may have been 10 rounds or 20 minutes. It was bad. He had blood on the sandbag. It was 10 power cleans with a sandbag, 10 pull-ups, 10 power cleans with a sandbag, 10 chin-ups. Maybe it was for 10 rounds, and they were just attacking it. Then the other guys were doing double kettlebell clean and press for 10, followed by 10 pull-ups, 10 rounds. We may have been doing it for 5 minutes. I can't remember. He's a judo fighter, and there was other judo guys and combative guys, so I just trained him for that, for the time period. What I look at is the different exercises. So I want to talk to you guys about squats, or squatting motions, all right? We have back squat, right? We did this weekend, we went with bands, chains, box. What did AJ say we could do? We could switch our leg position. We could go sumo stance. We could take athletic stance. We could change the height of the box. You could sit on the box for 3 seconds instead of 2 seconds. You could explode up. We don't do as many bands and chains with the younger ones, but we switch the movements. Back squat, box, no box. Pause at the bottom. Zercher squat, bring the crook of the elbows. Use a bar. Use a sandbag. Use 2 kettlebells. Use 1 kettlebell. Do 1 rack kettlebell with your free arm out to the side. Squat with a sandbag on the shoulder. Squat with a sandbag on the back. Front squat. Front squat with a pause. Front squat to a box. Kettlebell squats to a box. Squat coupled with a jump. Squats coupled with dumbbell snatch. Squat coupled with a sled. Squat coupled with sprinting around the gym next door. A lot of different things that we'll just constantly mix it in. So when I look at it's my lower body day, I'll say, okay, back squat with this day. Let me hit him with a different squat. Let me hit him with a trap bar deadlift. We went trap bar deadlift high bar. Let me go with trap bar deadlift low bar. Upper body day. Okay, we did overhead press with the bar. Let me have them overhead press with 2 kettlebells, with 1 kettlebell. Let me have them do a snatch instead of a press. Some coaches are very receptive. Unfortunately, many are not. And I've learned that, and it really bothers me. And I try not to let it get me like crazy emotional, but that's why I say like, that's what our job is, to save those kids. So what do? Marcy asks this great question. The kid is burnt out, beat up. So when he or she is going to train with you, is he or she going to be going through Metcons, or maybe a slower strength workout, a lot of recovery, building up their confidence, teaching them to eat better, getting their recovery, and also giving them some pride to speak up and tell the coach. You know, I tell the parents straight up. I go, really? We just put 40 pounds on your son, and you're going to let that coach tell you that he or she can't train here? So I tell them straight up. So as a coach, sometimes you have to stand up and tell the parents to say something. But just your workout for that kid so it's not being overdone. You know, quick story, we had a kid who was going to quit wrestling senior year. It was like a couple months before the season. He was very successful. He was very high stress because of his dad. And wrestling was like, go to the club, go to the club. They would wrestle and practice, go to clubs. I said, dude, do this. Don't run. Don't go to the wrestling club anymore. I go, I want you to show up here twice a week. I'll have you in and out in about 15 to 20 minutes. I go, when the wrestling season starts, we'll train once a week. 15 minutes. I go, I promise. 15 minutes. And that's what we did. We roll out, we do a super short warm-up. Our warm-up is about 15 minutes, 12 minutes. We do a super short warm-up, and I do a couplet or a triplet. Floor press plus swings. Deadlift plus swing plus rope climb. 5 rounds, shit like that. Then roll out. And that kid had the best, he did 4th in the state, he had like 140 something wins, but he was gonna quit. If I would have trained him like everybody else, he would have quit, he would have been burnt out. So read what those kids need, and also empower them to be strong here so they don't get bullied by coaches and all that shit. It's unfortunate, but we're going to be, that's why I told you about filling the gap, filling the void. Don't overlap what they're already doing. Fill what they're not getting. Oh, you're running all day? Well, we're going to deadlift hard. We're going to do real low rep, sub-max stuff. We're not going to kill the nervous system. Okay? Great question. Anybody else got questions?